Hosted by you/Sapphire, James. Serious, frequent travelers of Reddit, what's something you saw when traveling that was so scary you never went back somewhere? Throughout high school, me and some friends had these trips to South Texas desert near the border. We would camp out in the wilderness and shoot guns or build a bonfire. We graduated in 2004. Our last trip was in 2005 and we had a really scary experience. We had a campfire going at night. For those that don't know, deserts actually get cold at night due to lack of humidity. So we had a campfire going and 3 guys came out of the darkness into the light of the campfire. No hello. No what's up. In very basic English, the first guy says, "You come with us." This was not a request. We politely declined and the another guy said something in Spanish and was extremely angry. The first guy said to come with him again. We refused and he stepped forward. My friend panicked and pulled his shotgun out. Screamed we weren't going anywhere. The English-speaking guy simply said, "Okay. Okay. Stay." As he backed up. They left and we quickly put out the fire. I made sure everyone grabbed their wallets and phones. Old Razor flip phones. We got the heel out of there and sprinted towards the car. As we were driving away, we saw 3 sets of headlights driving over the flats. We killed the car's lights and drove in darkness on the road until we lost sight of them. We drove to a sheriff's office to report what had happened. We were told that if our story was true, it's a real good thing we did not go with them. It happened in Vietnam in the middle of nowhere. I was just hopping on my scooter outside a 7-Eleven when a young woman ran into the store screaming. She was clearly beaten and her clothes were ripped. A few seconds later, 3 men came after her, drag her outside and forces her into a car. One of the men had a knife in their hand. I was so shocked, I wanted to help but I was too afraid to do something. She looked at me yelling and banging at the car window when they drove away. I still think about her sometimes and feel guilty for my non-action. My sister, my mom and I were almost trafficked. We are originally from the Balkans, living in Germany. When my parents divorced, my mom took us for a holiday back home. The bus drive was 30+ hours. We almost arrived and my uncle was supposed to pick us up at the bus station. But we didn't arrive. It was around 11 p.m. and the bus driver said we had a flat tire in the middle of nowhere. There were 3 other women left in the bus. They started crying, since they told us there were some nice taxis waiting for us on the street to bring us to our homes. Which in retrospective was ridiculous since we all lived in different cities. But my mom and sister already got into the taxi, bags in the trunk. Then the women started screaming and crying, trying to call their husbands. Luckily one husband wasn't living far away, so he came with his family and the bus drivers were scared and the taxis left. Long story short, we later found out that a lot of women and girls went missing the last couple of months due to human trafficking. We went to the Dominican Republic for our honeymoon. One day we decided to take a day trip that the resort was offering. The trip included sightseeing by bus, lunch, a trip to a waterfall and ended with a horseback ride. There were about 7 of us in the group. At the end of the day, we were on our way back to the stables and we ventured underneath a bridge. A dude appeared out of the dense bushes/trees cussing at us and swinging a machete. One of the horses dumped its rider and the rest of us took off while the tour guide negotiated $, with the man. We all made it back to the bus safely but wide-eyed. Only Illinois had my car windows, left rear and rear, shot out as I was traveling south and approaching a railroad overpass. Bullet entered through the left rear window and exited out the rear window. I continued south until I was able to pull into a convenience store to examine the damage and to call the local police. When the police arrived, they looked at my shot out windows and said, "This hasn't happened for a couple of months now. So it must be a somewhat regular thing in Olney, Illinois for the cop to be so blaze about it." I will never go back to that place. I went to an ayahuasca retreat in Peru. The retreat itself was amazing and I'd recommend it to every living person. It was held pretty deep in the Amazon and in order to get there you have to either pay for a group bus or take a small motorbike taxi. No one is really willing to drive that far otherwise. After the retreat was over I had a couple days to stay and relax before I came back to the States. The girl that I bunked with had some time as well and we decided to go into Tarapoto, the nearest town, and just adventure around a while. We shopped and ate and took a tour through a chocolate factory. She was staying in a hotel in town to catch her early morning flight the next morning, so I took a motorbike taxi back to the jungle alone. About halfway down the road the driver stopped and a man holding an AR came up the cab and started asking me questions about where I was going and what I was doing, etc. I was completely alone with the driver, who stopped for this guy and the guy with a really big gun in the middle of the Amazon. I was beyond terrified. The whole ordeal lasted less than 5 minutes and ended with me paying the gun guy a toll of 10 sols, I think less than $8 used, not completely sure on the conversion. The driver insisted I had to do this, so I did and we thankfully drove away. A few miles later the driver stopped again and I almost had a heart attack. He insisted he had something to show me and that I should get out of the cab, so I did. It might have been stupid, I still don't know what the right thing to do was. He took me to the edge of the road where there was a cliff and below was the spot where a smaller river smashes violently and spectacularly into the face of the Amazon River. It was among the most beautiful and fantastic things I saw in Peru. We stood in silence and watched the rivers merging for a while before he safely delivered me back to the retreat. It was a scary ride, but man, what a fucking story. This happened in Puerto Rico back in '03. I would often take long drives to random and secluded or closed beaches at night so I could study in peace. One night while I was out studying I just happened to glance at my rearview mirror and saw that an illegal firearms deal was taking place right behind me. Apparently they weren't concerned about the presence of a witness, which I found to be a huge red flag. Without turning on my headlights, I crept out of that spot and drove off. No one followed me. Definitely ranks in my top 10 creepiest encounters. I once attended a work training event at a nice hotel in Dallas. For some backstory, I was a 19 to 20-year-old girl. During some downtime in the evening, I decided to walk across the street to a drugstore and purchase some snacks and water. The hotel sold a single water bottle for $7, so I wasn't having that. As I got to the drugstore, there were 4 or 5 men in a car and they were yelling strange things at me. It scared me and made me feel a bit uneasy, but I went inside and stayed inside the drugstore for a bit longer to wait them out. I decided to go back to the hotel after a while, so I walked outside and they were still there, waiting for me. At this point I was very scared and these guys were all yelling things at me. I ran across the street even though the crosswalk wasn't telling me I could go. I ended up making it. I went up to my room paranoid that they would be able to see what floor the elevator went to. After a while inside my room, I stupidly figured they were gone, as I didn't see them follow me into the hotel. I assumed I was being paranoid about the whole thing, so I went downstairs to smoke a cigarette by the fountain at the hotel. At this point the smoking age was still 18 in both my state and Texas. After I got down there and smoked for a bit, I truly realized my mistake. The men were there in the same car. They were yelling at me. One of them was speaking with a valet man, hotel employee, and looking at me. I immediately called my mom. She was yelling at me and scared for me. Then I got off the phone with her to call one of the women who were in training with me. Toward the end of the phone call with the woman I was training with, a man approached me from the group saying how beautiful I was and then walked away and watched me with a group of men. The hotel employee was nearby and I kept making looks at him, showing that I was scared and uncomfortable, but he had no response. I thought to myself that maybe these men were also staying in the hotel, so that could have been why they were there. But soon after the call, the woman came and found me and stayed with me. She was older than me and seemed very much like she could be my mother, so she stared them down with the most mama bear look I've ever seen and they ended up leaving soon after. At that point I realized they had never been staying at that hotel, and those men were definitely 100% going to do something to me if she wasn't there. The next day I spoke to some of the other women in my training class, and one of them was literally drugged by a man from the hotel. She had completely blacked out and woke up with her face down on a table outside with no memory of it. It turned out that the area of Dallas was known for sex work, but I'm not sure if that contributed to what happened to either of us. I was in the Dominican Republic and nobody from my group wanted to leave the resort. I was eventually able to find a local whose brother did Jeep tours and hired him to go off the beaten path. The entire country was a shithole on a level I could barely comprehend, and I immediately realized all those folks online who whine about America being a third world nation have absolutely no perspective whatsoever. Anyway, tangent aside, besides the appalling poverty, we drove by a woman being gang raped by about a dozen men with machetes. She looked right at us, yet the driver's only response was to drive even faster. When we got to the resort, he said to not feel bad as the only thing we could have done about the situation was get ourselves killed. He was completely unfazed by it, as if it was just a normal Saturday for him. Me and my husband live in Texas. He likes casinos, so once a year we drive up to Oklahoma to go to a casino. I'm perfectly content watching our daughters in the hotel while he goes and mildly gambles for a few hours. Then he watches them while I go and get a massage the next day. About 3 months ago we pack up for our annual trip and head to Oklahoma. We made reservations online through a booking website. But when we got to the hotel they denied our reservation, saying it never existed. We drive to numerous hotels in the area. All are booked. Apparently there was the Redneck Truck Festival, WTF, that same weekend. It's 11 p.m. at this point. The kids are sleeping in the back and we are desperately trying to find a hotel. We end up in the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma, and stumble upon a motel. It's sketchy, but the girls need to get out of the car and sleep in a proper bed. We decide to try and get a room, then leave first thing in the morning and head home. 5 hours away, my husband goes into the lobby and successfully gets a room. I have no idea which town we are in. I feel like I'm in a horror movie. The atmosphere is just creepy, no other buildings around except this motel. No cars in the parking lot except ours and a few others. We start unloading the car and get the girls inside and tucked in. I told my husband I left my purse in the car and went out to get it. I see the person that checked us in smoking a cigarette by the car. I say hello and he approaches me. You know it's dangerous out here for a young lady like yourself. The man looks like he's in his 30s and looks dirty. I give a nervous laugh and say yeah, but my husband is inside so I'm okay. He proceeded to walk closer to me and said my kids were cute. Now I'm worried because he never saw my kids. They were sleeping in the car, so at this point I can only assume he saw us bring them into the room. Which is odd because our room was nowhere close to the lobby. I understand he was smoking, but he could have just walked out of the lobby and smoked by the door. It's around 11 p.m. so I doubt any guests are arriving, so your smoke isn't going to bother anyone. Instead he walked around to the back where we were to smoke. He then asked me to walk with him to the lobby so he could give me another keycard for the room. Apparently he only gave my husband one instead of two. I said no, we were fine with one, and ran inside. I told my husband what happened and we locked the door with the extra lock, you know, the one that has the chain, so that way if someone who had a keycard tried to get in they couldn't because of the chain lock. We woke up at 6 a.m. and left. To this day I still have no idea what town that was, but we aren't going back to Oklahoma for a while. Thailand Pai. When I was dating with my GF we went there. Pai is a sort of out in the nowhere and popular with hippie hipster tourist spot. They also shot some famous Asian movies in this village, so although it's out in the nowhere it was still quite popular. First thing we noticed was how many stray dogs there were. It was not normal, about 20 dogs wherever you go, and they just walk into restaurants to beg for food etc. They were all super friendly and chill. When we went there was this huge reggae event. We went there and it lasted till 2 a.m. or so. You had to catch the shuttle bus to get back into the village since it was far out in the fields. When we were back in the village we couldn't find where we parked our scooter. It was scary to search for your bike in the middle of the night with a load of dogs following us and just watching us. When we finally found the bike and drove back to our resort, something strange happened. We saw a lady in the middle of the road at 3 or 4 a.m. at this point, dressed in a long black dress and long black hair, in the middle of the road we had to pass to get to the resort. She was flailing her arms around but didn't move her feet or move at all, and there were 30 or so dogs in a circle around her barking like crazy, but none of them went close to the lady. I thought I saw things, but my GF saw it too, and I told her to keep driving and don't stop. The resort was nearby, so we wanted to warn them about it and maybe someone needed help. But there was nobody to be seen for some reason. The barking also stopped and we decided to get to our room and sleep. Well, nope. Over the night we heard someone knocking on our door and window every now and then. Heard the dogs on the distant again, out of the gate, and it continued. The next day we decided to get the fuck out of this town, but every single bus was full due to this reggae event. I decided to pay a driver who approached us for a private drive for 4 times the price, but we just said yes, get us out of here. To this day we still don't know what it was about and felt so bad if it was really a lady who was just crazy and needed help. Frown, but every alarm went off and I think it was a good call to keep driving. I hope. Whenever I was visiting my girlfriend at her college, we would always go to this fairly grimy club in New Haven. I say this because while waiting online I saw a young college girl squat behind a car, while some small trickle of pee ran down her leg. My girlfriend and I couldn't move off the line and we both could have looked away but may. So anyway, this club had these like dancers on the pole doing their thing, loud hip hop was playing and we had drinks in our hand. Night was going well, and after like an hour and a few more mixed cocktails I start to feel it. The room starts tilting when I notice someone more fucked up than me. I know she's fucked up because her long hair is covering the front of her face and she's barely standing up. Her ankles were buckling like Bambi, and the guy behind her looked Seuss. He was in ripped jeans, a backward cap, and a shirt with a few stains. I don't know why, but like before I kept staring. My girlfriend I think was talking to her other friends about some creepy old guy with white hair trying to hit on girls. I keep tugging on her shirt, then like that weird scene in Big Fish, the one where everything slows down and the guy walks through the carnival? Well, this guy has the same effect. The song slows and the girl just buckles, drops like she just got knocked TF out. Her head tilts back, she's out, and as she's falling on the guy, he just hoists her up on his shoulder like a sack of potatoes and books it. He was so fast I felt like I was watching Mario Brothers on a speed run. Before I could say anything or do anything they just disappear into the crowd and a bouncer just whips his head in their direction. To this day I wonder about that girl and the guy who just picked her up like a leprechaun in his sack of gold. My girlfriend thinks I made it up, but every time I can't shake it off. I think that girl was drugged, I kept thinking. Hey, this is a long story. There is no TLDR because I can't explain it briefly. It's a true story, and there are no lies involved. It might seem mundane, but it creeped me out then and still to this day. I was 18, I was on a 3-month road trip with 3 friends, and we are all experienced with outdoorsy stuff. At no point did we not have access to clean water, food, survival material, and weapons. At all times in nature we were each armed with a handgun and hunting knife. I don't want to disclose our location or names, so don't ask. Here is the story. I was out hiking in the middle of a national forest with some friends. We're from the USA, hiking sometime mid-June, we're all experienced. It was a 3-month road trip this summer before we all went away to college, but we grew up hiking and camping. We wanted to hit up everywhere from Yosemite to Yellowstone to Hoosier National. Anyway, we're out in this one place where there's lots of old run-down structures from abandoned Native American settlements. We set up camp near a waterfall/creek because it was cooler there than anywhere else, and we always felt more comfortable near water. We get a good fire going, which is good because the bugs are horrible there, remember this. Mosquitoes especially. The fire drives them away mostly. I get up to pee about 11 p.m. and walk to the edge of where the light meets the dark tree line. While I'm taking a piss, for some reason I can't explain, I have this extreme urge to walk out further. I tell the boys I'm gonna check something out and I want one of them with me. There's 4 of us, so A and B stay near the campfire, and C walks with me. He keeps asking me what's wrong, so I tell him I just need to see something. Seriously, it's like something is controlling me. We finally reach this clearing about 200 yards from the fire, but still along the creek. There's no trees in a space about 50 by 50 yards. No trees at all, not even the base of trees like any had been cut down. Straight up no trees had ever been there. This weirded me out for some reason. Plenty of overgrowth and plant life though. Then there was a structure. It wasn't Native American. It looked old-fashioned, but like it was just built. So it wasn't old, just built to look old. No lights, no signs of life. Nothing. I remember hearing a weird humming noise, like the meditation monk sound Faint, but definitely there, and human sounding. But again, no sound of human life. My buddy asks me why the hell I wanted to come here so badly. I didn't respond because I had no answer. He said at least there's no bugs. I remember this very clearly because that was the next red flag. We were in the middle of a forest at night, next to a creek, and there was no bug life at all. I then noticed I didn't hear anything. Not wind, not animals, not bugs, nothing but silence. I don't know why, but it freaked me out. I wanted to go into the structure. It was a house-looking thing the size of a tiny cabin, maybe 250 square feet. I started walking towards it, but my buddy grabbed my arm and said, "We're going." He pulled me away and I kept fighting because I desperately wanted to go into that cabin. He pulled me all the way to the fire and I only stopped fighting him when I felt the warmth of the fire again. I realized how cold I was at that point. I was freezing. Middle of June, humid and hot, and I was so cold I was almost shivering. When my other 2 buddies asked what we were doing, I did not want to say anything for some reason. Neither did C. So I said I thought I saw an animal. I didn't sleep that night, and I don't think C did either. The next morning I told the other 2 guys about it and they were creeped out. They said they wanted to see this cabin thing for themselves, so I took them to the spot, but it was run the fuck down when I took them. I swear, it looked totally different in the light of day. All we had were some really high-powered flashlights the night before, but I promise it was like it had aged like 75 years in that one night. The 2 windows were broke, no door, missing an entire section of wall, etc. There were plenty of bugs and animal sounds too when we went back. So we all left and they poked fun at me and C, but we knew that something weird happened the previous night. C and I spoke about it each other about a year after it happened, and we both agreed that it was weird and that we have no idea what happened. This actually happened right outside my house, so technically doesn't count, but we have since sold it and I wouldn't go back. I was walking my dog at around 1 a.m., and he is a golden and super friendly. All of a sudden he bolts and breaks his collar, and runs up to this man who was hiding behind a tree. The guy yells, and says he is afraid of dogs and tells me to come and get him. So I go and grab the dog and apologize profusely, but at the same time alarm bells are going off. The guy is sweating profusely, and is just off. The dog is whining and really wants to go to this man, and I tell him he is friendly and not to worry. He responds, "Well, maybe I could try to pet him." So against my better judgment, I let the dog go closer and he lays down, exposes his belly, and the man has what I can only describe as a moment with him. He pets home for a good minute and has tears in his eyes. Then like a switch flips, he looks up at me and says, "It's awful late for a pretty girl like you to be out here in nothing but pajamas." Your dog saved you tonight." Then he turned and walked away. I booked it home. My dumbass dog, who would welcome a burglar into the house with open arms, saved me. From 1999 to 2002 I was traveling the Midwest and plains. I remember driving through some arid desert, which looked like it used to be farmland before the long-term drought in the area. My car broke down not far from a farm, and a very nice older couple let me stay with them until I could get my truck fixed in 2002. They had a wonderful dog I really enjoyed playing with. Let me tell you though, the amount of people that would come by this family's home was absolutely insane. A sickly-looking man kept harassing them to turn their property into a literal dump/landfill. There were 5 to 6 gangsters leaving large footprints on the more secluded areas of the property, burying God knows what. An ancient-looking dude wanted to film on their property, not nursing home old, but crypt keeper old. As nice as their dog was, holy fucking shit, the 2 ducks they kept seemed to have a vendetta for everyone. At least there was a nice traveling barber service in the area. Got a real nice buzz cut. I got into a minibus accident in the mountains in Bolivia. The air brakes failed as we were driving down the mountainside. All of a sudden the driver's side passenger jumped out of the bus onto the road, then all of us passengers started to jump from the moving bus, hitting the dirt and rolling. The bus ended up crashing into one of those runoffs built into the side of the mountain. Terrifying experience. From then on I took trains and planes when possible. I don't know if I'd venture to Bolivia again. Rented a canoe on a river in Arkansas when I was visiting the US one summer. Late summer, so the water was low and slow. It was hot, there was the odd water snake around, and the low level of the water meant walking and dragging the canoe was frequently required. Around an hour or so in, going around this particularly slow bend, and high up on the bank there's this ramshackle house. Pretty big, and looked like it had been built by making additions every now and then for half a century. Random balconies jutting out, the odd external staircase, rusting farming equipment outside. There were clothes on a line and a couple of tables outside overlooking the river with what looked like barbecue stuff on them. I was alone, and the river was very quiet. This place gave me a serious case of the willies, and I wanted to get past it and to some semblance of civilization ASAP. As a younger man I used to road trip frequently. I'd get some cash in my pocket on payday and just pick a direction. Once, I ended up in very rural eastern Oregon. As the sun was going down I saw that a gate to a closed highway was open just a bit, and I was able to drive past it. This particular highway crossed a pass in the mountains. The highway, being closed, wasn't being plowed for snow, but there were only a few inches of snow on the road at higher elevations. At first it was magical, the car sluicing silently through the snow as the sun was setting, no other tracks. I felt alone in the world. I kept driving, maybe 60 to 70 miles, as the sun set and I entered the other side of the pass, wending my way down a canyon by myself, the stars brighter than I'd ever seen them but the landscape completely devoid of light. Humming along with the engine burbling at 25 miles per hour. As I approached a switchback corner, I hit my brakes for the first time in a while, and the chrome grille of an old pickup truck, no more than 2 feet off my rear bumper, lit up, reflecting my brake lights. No headlights on, no way to see more of the truck, no way to see the driver. He was just following me, silently. I'm fairly well acquainted with driving quickly in inclement conditions. I pushed my old Subaru to its limits trying to get away from this guy, but every time I hit the brakes, his truck was 2 feet off my back bumper. I eventually got to the other side of the pass, tore my car up bypassing the very closed gate, and hit a major highway. Seriously, fuck that guy.